Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to tell you that today, you are a part of theme park history. You see, Splash Mountain, the reigning, defending, undisputed best log flume in the world, has finally closed its doors at Disneyland and the Magic Kingdom. It earned the title with relative ease by being, by and large, the most complete log flume we've ever seen. With fantastic sets, a boatload of charming animatronics, phenomenal pacing, a tremendous earworm soundtrack, and decent thrills to boot, it was hard to say that any other log flume could even come close to beating it for that title. Though, that being said, some people certainly did try to argue for something else being better, but ultimately were not able to sway the masses. And even though theme park rides are certainly a subjective art, I could like something that you dislike, you could love something that I hate, and neither of us would be wrong in saying either of those things. Right, I mean, you could be an insane person and say you love the Cat in the Hat ride, or you could be a normal person and say that the ride is horrible, which would probably make you a bit intelligent too, and maybe some would even say handsome, and probably also charming, but in an approachable way, the kind of way that you don't really see nowadays. Anyways, my point is that despite the fact that theme park rides are notoriously subjective, more or less everyone was able to get on board with Splash Mountain being the de facto #1 log flume in the world. But now that Splash Mountain is closed, for the first time in decades since it first opened in 1989, we can now have the discussion, can now have the conversation about what the best log flume in the world is. And now that Splash Mountain has abdicated the title, all of a sudden we have a race for that #1 spot. A race I'm calling a game of flumes. Or maybe a game of logs. I don't know. Neither really rolls off the tongue. But yes, today we will decide who is worthy of wearing the crown that Splash Mountain once wore. Now you're probably saying, well, wait a minute. There gotta be hundreds, thousands of log flumes in the world. Are we really gonna go through each one of those and determine whether or not they're actually qualified to be in contention for this title? Well, one, look at the runtime, buddy. I'll get you out of here quick. And two, I'm gonna eliminate 95% of log flumes right off the bat. You see, vast majority of log flumes are lacking in a number of categories that automatically disqualify them from even being considered for the #1 spot. For instance, most log flumes don't have any sort of theming or landscaping. Sure, you could take a roller coaster, for instance, that has no theming or landscaping whatsoever and put it as your #1, but that's because roller coasters can offer up a unique sense of thrills and forces that other rides can't. Whereas log flumes, there aren't any log flumes out there that are providing unmatched amount of thrill that would be enough to overcome any sort of lack of theming that it might have. The theming is really a big part of what makes log flumes great. Speaking of thrills, most of these rides actually don't really provide much of any thrill whatsoever. Many log flumes only have 1 or 2 drops, and a lot of times they're nothing to write home about. And then you have what I like to call the cardinal sin of log flumes. The fact that most log flumes do not get you wet. At best, you're getting a sprinkle or a drizzle. And that's it. Bottom line is, the whole purpose of a log flume, the whole reason why they were invented in the first place, was to get guests wet to cool them off on hot summer days. If you are not succeeding in that very basic fact, you cannot be in consideration for the top spot. Simply cannot. That is the #1 rule you cannot break as a log flume. And yes, as sad as it is, the vast majority of log flumes do fall trap to these 3 points. Meaning that yes, most log flumes suck. Sorry. But luckily for us, there are an elite few who do not make these mistakes and could be worthy of replacing Splash Mountain at the top of the hill. So without further ado, allow me to introduce who I believe to be the top 5 contenders for the title of best log flume in the world. Yes, you may go ahead and argue some other log flume in the comments, but ultimately, these are the 5 that have the most supporters. And let's go ahead and start with the one you all are probably expecting to be on this list, because you know I am the universal guy. Dudley Do Right's Ripsaw Falls. A ride that is undeniably heavily influenced by Splash Mountain. It tries to do pretty much everything Splash Mountain did. It has a number of animatronics, it has fantastic sets, but it even does some things that Splash Mountain didn't do. It has exquisite thrills, like phenomenal thrills. I mean, that final drop is amazing. You go underneath this building and then you hit a small airtime hill, not only providing an exhilarating moment, but also getting you absolutely soaked in the process. This ride doesn't just get you wet, you get absolutely soaked, which, you know, depending on who you are, could be a pro, could be a con. I mean, it kind of gets you to the point where maybe you could be deemed uncomfortably wet. For me, it's not a problem, but, you know, teach their own. But really, the greatest asset of this ride is its humor. It is one of the most funny rides you will ever go on, period. There's a joke every single turn. I have ridden this ride God knows how many times, and I still find new jokes laid about, strewn about the ride on each and every single visit. This is on top of the fact that the ride is endlessly quotable, perhaps the most quotable ride ever. I say, you're going the wrong way. It seems I've lost my train of thought. I'd go on all day with these horrible impressions, naming quotes from the ride endlessly. It is amazing. It is fantastic. And I mean, it's totally worthy of being in the top 5, at the very least, when we're talking about the #1 log flume in the world. That then brings me to our next contender, a ride that I'm sure many of you West Coasters have been screaming at the screen, and that is Timber Mountain Log Ride at Knott's Berry Farm. Unlike Dudley Do Right, this ride actually inspired Splash Mountain. It's very reminiscent of the ride, but came out 20 years earlier. It's got the theming, it's got the animatronics, and it even has the music, including a special song that they played during Halloween when they transformed the ride into its Halloween Hootenanny version, which also has a tremendous lighting package that goes along with it. And listen, personally, I do put a lot of stock into holiday overlays because it's rare enough to see those on really any sort of ride, but on a log flume nonetheless, that is really impressive and really special because it gives you 2 types of different experiences throughout the year. Overall, the ride is extremely charming and likely was actually the #1 log flume in the world before Splash Mountain opened, so it has to be on the list to reclaim the throne of which it once lost. Coming up next is a ride you might not expect. It is Log Shoot at Nickelodeon Universe at the Mall of America. Yes, an indoor log flume at a mall nonetheless is making the top 5 for best log flume in the world? Huh? I know, it's bizarre, but this ride is shockingly good. The ride has a surprising amount of theming, albeit quite a bit of it is outside, just in the mall, which, you know, even though, yes, not necessarily well themed, is certainly giving you unique views and unique perspectives on the mall, and definitely is a really kind of bizarre and interesting experience you wouldn't necessarily expect. The ride also features a number of animatronics, including a massive Paul Bunyan animatronic, as well as his ox companion. The sets where these animatronics reside are wonderful, if simple, and the ride carries with it actually quite a substantial amount of thrill with 2 solid drops and no restraints on this thing either, which really certainly adds to any sort of intensity the ride has. And even though this is an indoor mall, the ride still strives to get you wet. In fact, you actually get pretty substantially wet on this ride, which is awesome. And here's the real kicker with Log Shoot. It has an obscene amount of holiday overlays. It turns into Fog Shoot for Halloween. It turns into the Yule Log Shoot for Christmas. Even during 2022 when Top Gun Maverick came out, it turned into the Kenny Loggins Shoot, theming the ride after the artist who came up with the song Highway to the Danger Zone. Like, what? What rides are doing this? I just mentioned how impressive it was that Timber Mountain Log Ride had 1 holiday overlay. This ride's getting a holiday overlay every other couple months. Not to mention that even when there isn't a holiday overlay going on where they completely overhaul the ride, even for certain holidays like Valentine's Day, they'll put decorations throughout the ride to still give it a different ride experience. This ride is unique in every sense of the word, and as a result of that, it is more than worthy of being considered for that top spot. That then brings me to our first international pick, that being Chiapas at Phantasialand in Germany. This ride has beautiful theming and tremendous scale. while also offering up a few fun animatronics and a great soundtrack. And there's even a dance party in the middle of it. Come on now, that's awesome. But really, what's earned this ride a spot on the list is the fact that it's perhaps the most thrilling log flume in the world. Not only does it go backwards for a spell, but it also has perhaps the greatest final drop on a ride. Not only is the drop substantial in scale, but you go underneath a bridge and then go into a massive airtime hill. Think about Dudley Do-Right's drop, but on steroids. That's basically what Chiappa's final drop is. And then that brings me to our final challenger, perhaps one of the most imposing I've mentioned so far, that being Valhalla at Blackpool Pleasure Beach in the United Kingdom, a multi-time winner of the Golden Ticket Award for Best Water Ride in the world. Valhalla is certainly one that many insiders have been placing their bets on. The ride was recently refurbished and renovated in 2023 and is unique in the sense that it is completely indoors. The ride has a dark, horror, Nordic theme that certainly is a master in tension and atmosphere. It doesn't have a lot of animatronics, but the animatronics it does have are absolutely masterful. And in place of animatronics in many parts of the rides, they'll have statues as you carry a lot of speed through a lot of parts of this ride, and you're also in the dark, so they use lighting and statues to emulate different things popping up throughout the ride. There are also grand sets throughout this thing. They'll have you craning your neck upwards to see all the detail laid out in front of you, and several groundbreaking, unique effects throughout this whole entire ride experience, including a water tunnel similar to that of Poseidon's Fury, except smaller in scale and does not use a wall to get that effect, and as a result, water's just absolutely pouring on you as you go underneath it. You get absolutely soaked here. Another moment where you get soaked is when these two log hammers come crashing into the side of your cart. And then you have this crazy sequence where you have a bunch of flaming arrows being shot at you and this spiked log rolling over top of you. It's a true cacophony of effects happening in this final scene. The final scene leading up to the granddaddy of grand finales. You have the final drop that has an airtime hill in the middle of it, not after it, in the middle of it, which then brings your cart crashing into a fiery inferno that is currently having the track engulf in flames. Words cannot describe how insane this moment is, so I'll just let the visuals speak for themselves. So there you have it, folks. There are your 5 claimants for the throne that Splash Mountain once sat on. So my only question is,
who wants to be king?
Now, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and place my vote for who I think of these 5 all elite level log flumes deserves to be sitting alone as king of the hill. And I have to say, for my money, it's not Timber Mountain Log Ride. I know, sue me, but here's the thing, it's not particularly thrilling. Even the final drop is somewhat tame, and you don't really get all that wet on this ride. Even the POV that I picked up for this video, guess what? The people at the end literally said they don't get wet. So like I said before, that's the number 1 cardinal sin. That's the one rule you can't break if you're going to be number 1. So for me, hey, you're already gone. You're already out, in my opinion, as far as taking that number 1 spot. The next one I have to eliminate is Chiappa's. Though it does have its great moments, I will say the pacing is a bit poor. There's a lot of moments where there's not really much of anything happening or really anything for you to look at. Part of that's because of it going backwards and the turntables there. But even without that, there still are a lot of moments where you're outside and there's nothing really going on. You're just kind of meandering and there's nothing really happening. And, you know, though the thrills in this ride are extremely great, it doesn't have a lot going on in the theming or storytelling aspect to really make up for its weak spots. Then the next one I'm eliminating, which may come as a surprise, is Valhalla. Here's the thing. On a first ride through, a lot of those dark moments when there's really nothing happening, you just have that eerie music in the background, I'm sure those are great. They sure are building up a lot of tension, a lot of suspense. But after you've already ridden it and you already know what's coming, those moments just end up being dull and boring. And that's about pretty much the entire first half of the ride is that, right? Not really much happening, just building tension, building atmosphere. And like I said, if you've already been on the ride, it's not really doing anything for you. So for me, it's really a second half ride, and though that second half is phenomenal, it's not enough to put it past more complete experiences ahead of it. Which, yes, means you have in the final two my universal bias in Dudley Do Right and Log Shoot, a mall log flume. Somehow, a ride that shouldn't even exist is sitting here in the top 2 of my vote for the best log flume in the world. And I'm not even gonna lie, I've been going back and forth on this for days. Dudley Do Right has its weak spots, its dull moments, and certainly also is just a little bit outdated. It certainly is showing its age and could certainly use a bit of a refurbishment to get it into a more of a modern state of being. Whereas Log Shoot certainly doesn't have the scale of Dudley Do Right. It doesn't have the amount of animatronics. It doesn't have as much detail in the sets. It certainly doesn't have really any jokes for that matter. And it has operational issues of its own, as many days going to Nickelodeon Universe, you may run to the risk of this ride being closed. It often is closed for extended periods of time throughout the year, with typically very little forewarning for guests before their visit. So as you can see, it was a tough call. I went back and forth on it, but I have decided that the best log flume in the world, post Splash Mountain, the one that will wear the crown proudly, at least until Tiana's Bayou Adventure opens up this summer. We'll see if that takes the crown. But at least for now, for the next few months, your new champion is Log Shoot at Mall of America. Now, why did I pick Log Shoot? Well, for one, it's the underdog. Who doesn't love an underdog story? A log flume at a mall? Are you kidding me? The fact it's even in this conversation in the first place is incredible. It deserves the win. And two, so that way I could say, a Mountie always gets his man, but not always the title of best log flume in the world. Oh, it's just too funny. I couldn't resist it. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. What ride do you think is the best log flume in the world? Do you agree with my pick, or do you think it was something else? Something that I didn't even mention in the top 5? Do you think Tiana's Bayou Adventure will stand a chance to reclaim Splash Mountain's throne? And yes, I know Splash Mountain still exists in Japan. Shut up. Keep chirping in your little birdhouse. Chirp, chirp, chirp. Shut up. I'll see you all next time. Bye. Peace. Later.